When I first met my husband's mother, I genuinely thought she liked me. She welcomed me with a smile, offered me tea, and called me sweetheart, like I was already part of the family. Everyone told me she was a kind woman, respected, traditional, and deeply attached to her son. But I felt something strange the first time I looked into her eyes. There was warmth in her words, but not in her gaze. At the beginning of our relationship, things were smooth. She called often, invited us for dinner every Sunday, and was always asking if I needed help with anything. At first it seemed nice, but then came the strange stories, little anecdotes about my husband's past. She talked a lot about his ex-girlfriends. I always liked Camila. She was so gentle and quiet, and such a great cook. She used to fold his shirts exactly how he liked. I'd smile, trying to be polite. But deep down, it was like she was trying to plant a seed of doubt, like she was comparing me, testing me, trying to remind me that I wasn't the first, and maybe not the best. Still, I brushed it off. I told myself it was normal. After all, mothers are protective, right? But then I noticed something more unsettling. Every time we visited her house, my husband would change after we left. He'd be more distant, more serious. He'd make comments he never made before. Why don't you take better care of the house? My mom said you look tired lately. Are you okay? She thinks you're not very affectionate. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. I didn't want to accuse anyone without proof. But the more it happened, the more I realized something was wrong. This wasn't just a concerned mother. This was a woman who needed control. And when she felt it slipping, she started playing dirty. She never insulted me directly. No, she was too smart for that. Her weapons were suggestion, guilt, and manipulation. She'd say things like, "I know you're busy, sweetheart, but my son deserves to be really loved, you know?" He used to laugh more before. "You remember, right, honey?" My husband started believing her. He began to question me, criticize me, doubt me. One night, he looked at me and said, "I think you're pulling me away from her. And I don't know if that's love or control." I felt like the ground had cracked beneath me. How could this woman, who smiled at me every time we met, be saying things that made him question our relationship? How long had she been whispering poison into his ears? And worse, how long had he been listening? I started feeling like a stranger in my own home. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't compete with the version of me that she created in his mind. A version where I was cold, distant, selfish. A version that wasn't even real. But when someone hears the same story over and over, they start to believe it, even if it's a lie. And I was watching the man I loved slip away. Not because he stopped loving me, but because someone else was rewriting our story. It wasn't one fight that ended everything. It wasn't a betrayal or even a screaming match. It was the slow destruction. One sentence at a time, one poisoned thought wrapped in concern. At first, my husband just seemed tired, irritable. He started working later, avoiding small talk, and barely touched me at night. When I asked him if something was wrong, he said, "I don't know. It's just, I've been thinking, maybe we moved too fast." That sentence cut deeper than he knew. Because we hadn't moved too fast. We'd been together for 3 years before marrying. We knew each other deeply. We shared everything, or so I thought. But that's the thing about emotional manipulation. It doesn't need to be loud to be effective. It just needs to be repeated, slowly, quietly, like water eroding stone. I started noticing changes in our conversations. I'd suggest something simple, like taking a weekend trip together, and he'd say, "Why do you always need to escape?" My mom says couples who run from routine are usually running from each other. I'd cook dinner, and he'd barely touch it. "Mom made this better last week. She said you don't really cook for me like you used to." It was always her voice, even when it came from his mouth. Sometimes I'd walk into the kitchen and find him staring at his phone with a frustrated look. I knew who he was talking to, and when I'd ask what's wrong, he'd say, "She's just worried. She thinks you're making me choose between her and you." But I never asked him to choose. I never even thought of doing that. That's when I realized I wasn't in a marriage anymore. I was in a war, and I didn't even know the rules. Every time I tried to speak up, to show him how this manipulation was affecting us, he'd shut down. He'd accuse me of being jealous, controlling, ungrateful. And worst of all, you never accept when she's just trying to help. But I did accept it. I accepted everything. I swallowed my pain, ignored the small humiliations, and kept trying to win back the man I married. But every time I reached out, she reached deeper, into his mind, his heart, his memories. I began questioning myself. Was I the problem? Was I being too sensitive? Was I the one turning him against her? That's how gaslighting works. It makes you doubt your reality until your only truth is pain. One night, I found him on the balcony, staring at the stars. I sat beside him and asked, "Do you still love me?" He didn't answer. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just looked at me, with a sadness I didn't recognize. And that silence hurt more than any insult ever could. I cried myself to sleep that night. And while I lay there, eyes swollen and heart shattered, I realized something terrifying. I was losing not because I wasn't enough, but because she never wanted me to be enough. She wanted me gone, and she was winning. There are things people say that stay with you for a few hours, some for a few days, but then there are words that infect your soul, words that echo, words that change you. For me, it was a whisper, a quiet phrase spoken just loud enough for me to hear as I passed the kitchen. We were visiting my mother-in-law for what was supposed to be a peaceful family dinner. I was helping set the table, and she was with my husband in the other room. I walked past them, carrying a tray of glasses, when I heard it. She leaned in close to him and said, "One day, you're going to thank me for saving you from her." She didn't know I was listening. Or maybe she did. Maybe she wanted me to hear it. I froze. The glasses in my hand started to shake. I felt the blood drain from my face. I stared at the dining room wall like it could swallow me whole. My body was there, but my mind had gone numb. Saving him from me? What was I? A disease? A threat? A mistake? I didn't say a word that night. I played the good wife. I smiled. I passed the food. I asked polite questions. But inside, I was screaming. When we got home, I didn't confront him immediately. I couldn't. I was afraid of his answer. What if he agreed with her? What if he already felt saved? The next morning, I asked him carefully, "Do you ever feel like your mom talks about me in a way that maybe isn't fair?" He blinked a few times, then responded without emotion. "She's just being protective. She sees things I don't." There it was again, her voice coming from him, not just in words, but in tone, in rhythm, in logic. He was slipping away from me, and I was watching it happen. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I recorded her, not illegally, just discreetly. One afternoon when she came to visit and asked to speak to me alone, we sat at the table. She sipped tea. I pressed record on my phone under a napkin. And for the next 15 minutes, she told me everything. Not directly, of course. Not with open threats. But with polished venom. You'll never truly understand him like I do. He tells me things he would never say to you. I'm just trying to protect my son. That's what a real woman does. A real woman. That phrase stayed with me. Like I was somehow fake. A temporary placeholder. A disappointment wrapped in skin. That night, I played the recording for my husband. His face went pale. He stared at the phone as if it were a stranger talking. He didn't say anything at first, but then he said something I'll never forget. "I know, but she's still my mother." Still, as if that excused everything. As if love should mean tolerating betrayal. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because he told me to, but because my heart couldn't lie beside his anymore. Because now, I knew the truth. This wasn't just jealousy. This wasn't just a difficult relationship. This was psychological warfare. After I played her recording to my husband, and he replied with, "She's still my mother," something inside me shattered. Not just a piece of my heart. No, it was something deeper. Like the collapse of trust itself. He didn't defend me. He didn't confront her. He went silent. And silence, in times like these, is not neutral. It's betrayal with a mask on. But I didn't leave. Not yet. Because a part of me still believed I could fix it. I told myself maybe he just needed time. Maybe he would come to his senses. Maybe he'd recognize that the woman he chose to marry was being slowly erased, and that the hands doing it were the same ones that once rocked his cradle. But I underestimated her. She wasn't just whispering poison into his ears. She was setting traps. The next week, I received a text from my mother-in-law. I'd like to start over. Come by for tea, just us. No tension, just peace. Against my better judgment, I agreed, because part of me, the exhausted, heartbroken part, still hoped that maybe, just maybe, she'd see me as human. That maybe she didn't hate me. That it was just a misunderstanding, or grief, or jealousy she could learn to let go of. So I went. She greeted me with a fake smile. Her eyes scanned me like a scanner checking for flaws. She led me into the living room, where everything was perfect. Too perfect. Candles lit, table set, tea already poured. I sat down. She sat across from me. And the moment the door clicked shut, her expression changed. The smile disappeared. Her voice dropped, and her words sliced through the silence. "You're not what I wanted for him. You never were." She said it with calm, calculated clarity, as if she had rehearsed it. Then she added, "But he won't leave you unless you give him a reason." That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't maternal concern. This was strategy. She was trying to corner me, to make me react. And then, the trap. She reached under the table and pulled out a small photo album. Inside were photos I had never seen, private moments, screenshots of my social media from years ago, comments taken out of context, even a picture of me hugging an old friend, a man, labeled evidence. "You think I don't know how to protect what's mine?" she whispered. It wasn't even about love for her son anymore. It was ownership. If I show these to him, he'll question everything. All I need is one doubt. Just one. I sat there frozen, trembling, furious, but I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood up and said, "You already lost. The moment you had to dig this low to feel powerful, you lost." Then I walked out. But as I closed her door behind me, I realized she wasn't just playing games anymore. She was at war, and I was the enemy. I should have known she wouldn't waste any time. Less than 24 hours after I walked out of her house, my husband came home with a face I didn't recognize. Cold, quiet, focused. He didn't ask how my day was. He didn't say he loved me. He didn't even look me in the eye. Instead, he dropped his keys on the table, pulled out his phone, and said, "We need to talk." My stomach twisted. I already knew what was coming. He opened a folder and started swiping through images, the same ones his mother had shown me the day before. The old photo with a male friend, the screenshots, the captions twisted out of context, even a sarcastic tweet I had written years ago that said, "Sometimes I wonder what it'd be like to disappear and start over." He looked up at me, his jaw tight. "Why didn't you ever tell me about these?" I stared at him. I had no words. Because how do you defend yourself when you're not even being accused of a real crime, only insinuations? How do you protect yourself when truth doesn't matter, only the doubt someone has planted? I tried to explain. I told him the context. I reminded him of who I was, who I had always been. The woman who stood by him, who encouraged him when he was lost, who helped him rebuild his life. I begged him to remember the real me, not the shadow his mother had painted. But he didn't want to remember. He wanted to believe her. "Maybe she sees things I've missed," he said. I felt the air leave my body. It didn't matter that we had built a life together. It didn't matter how much I had sacrificed. She got to him, and she got there because he opened the door for her. He didn't scream. He didn't accuse me of cheating. He just let her version of me settle into his mind like a fog. And now, no matter what I said, he couldn't see clearly anymore. We slept in separate rooms that night. I lay in bed thinking about how a single person, armed with the right amount of resentment and time, can turn love into suspicion. She didn't have to make him hate me. She only had to make him question me. And the seed of doubt she planted? He was watering it now. The next morning, I made breakfast. He didn't eat. He barely spoke. He left for work early. I walked back into the bedroom, looked at the empty side of the bed, and asked myself, how did it come to this? And then the scariest thought came to me. Maybe this was her plan all along, to break me not with fights, but with silence, with mistrust, with whispers in the dark. She didn't just want to ruin our relationship. She wanted me to destroy it, so she could look innocent. I realized then that I was no longer trying to save a marriage. I was trying to survive a manipulation so well crafted it had turned love into paranoia. And the man I married? He was no longer beside me. He was standing across from me, on her side. I had been quiet for too long. I let her smear my name, twist my actions, and poison the heart of the man I loved. I stayed patient, believing truth would speak louder than manipulation. But now, I saw the truth clearly. Silence doesn't protect you from people who know how to weaponize doubt. I had to fight back. Not with screaming, not with drama, but with truth, strategy, and proof. The first thing I did was go back through every message, voice note, and social media post I had. I gathered screenshots of texts between me and my husband that showed affection, commitment, the kind of conversations that proved our relationship had always been real and strong. I looked for messages that contradicted what she had shown him. Then I remembered something important, a backup of an old group chat where my husband himself had once defended me against one of his cousins, saying, "If anyone ever disrespects her, they're disrespecting me too." I sent that screenshot to him. No words, no begging, just the evidence of who he used to be, the man who saw me. He didn't reply, so I took the next step. I called his sister. She and I had always had a distant but polite relationship. We were never close, mostly because their mother kept her in a constant state of loyalty confusion. But I took a risk. I asked her, "Can I ask you something? Woman to woman? Sister to sister?" She hesitated, then said yes. I told her everything. How her mother had twisted stories. How she had kept a private folder of photos to use against me. How she had whispered doubts into her brother's ear until our marriage felt like it was falling off a cliff. And her answer shocked me. She did the same thing to the woman my uncle married. She told me how her own mother had ruined other relationships in the family. How she always needed to feel indispensable, like no woman could love her boys better than she could. How she disguised her obsession with control as motherly protection. I asked if she'd be willing to talk to her brother. She said, "It's time. I've stayed quiet long enough too." The next evening, my husband came home. I was sitting on the couch waiting. He looked tired, torn, confused. He sat down and said, "My sister called me." I nodded. She told me some things. About Mom. About the past. Still, I didn't say a word. I just let him process it. "I've been blind," he whispered. "I let her feed me poison, and I drank it like it was truth." Tears filled my eyes, but I held them back. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. And I replied, "It starts by choosing who you're really building a life with, me or your mother's version of me." He didn't answer right away. He just sat there. But I knew this moment wasn't about an instant solution. It was about reclaiming ground, about pulling our marriage back from the edge, together. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone, not because the battle was over, but because I had finally stood up, and because he finally listened. The days that followed were fragile. My husband was distant, but not cold, silent, but not cruel. It was like watching a man rebuild a part of himself he didn't even know had been broken. We spoke carefully. We revisited old wounds. We cried together for the version of us that had been buried under months of manipulation. And for a while I thought, maybe this could be the beginning of healing. But I underestimated her one last time. It started with a message, one simple notification from an unknown number. No name, no introduction, just a video. I opened it. It was a recording, grainy, low quality, clearly taken from behind a window. In the video, I'm seen hugging a friend, the same male friend from the old photo. We're laughing. He kisses my cheek. I walk away, innocent, friendly, taken completely out of context. But it was enough. A text followed seconds later. "He may forgive you now, but truth always finds a way to reveal itself." I didn't need to ask who sent it. I knew her voice even in silence. I rushed to show my husband. I told him everything, who the man was, what that moment meant, and how she was clearly watching me even now. I expected him to be angry, defensive, maybe even suspicious, but instead, he sat down, head in hands. He didn't look at me. "I can't do this," he muttered. "I love you, but I feel like I'm stuck between two lives, two loyalties, and no matter what I choose, I lose." And in that moment, I understood something painful. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about him. His inability to separate love from dependence. his fear of choosing a future that would disappoint his past. He wasn't a boy anymore, but she had raised him to remain one. And now I saw it clearly. I could fight for him. I could expose every lie. I could prove myself over and over again. But unless he stood up to her, not just for me but for himself, we'd be trapped in this cycle forever. So I made a decision. That night I packed a bag, just enough to stay at my sister's for a few days. I left a note. Nothing dramatic, just a few lines. This isn't goodbye, it's a mirror. Look into it. See who you really are, without her voice in your ears. Then decide, do you want to build a marriage or protect a prison? And I walked out. For the first time in months, I felt air in my lungs. Not the painful kind you gasp after crying, but the calm kind, the breath of self-respect. I didn't leave because I stopped loving him. I left because I started loving myself again. I knew she'd try again. I knew she'd call him, console him, manipulate the story, turn me into the villain, the ungrateful wife who abandoned her precious boy. But I also knew this. If he couldn't see the truth now, he never would. And I wasn't going to stay trapped in someone else's war. I stayed away for 5 days. 5 days of silence. 5 days without us. 5 days without waking up to his breathing or hearing the creak of our bedroom door in the morning. At first, I kept checking my phone. Every buzz made my heart race. Every minute without a message felt like a confirmation of failure. But then something changed. The silence stopped being suffocating and started to feel like peace. I cooked for myself again. I read books I had abandoned. I called my mom and cried in her lap like a child. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of being alone, because I realized something vital. Being alone is hard, but being unloved in a relationship is worse. On the 6th day, he called me. His voice was quiet, shaky, the voice of a man who had finally been stripped of all illusions. He said, I told her to stop calling. I told her I needed space. I told her she's not welcome in our marriage anymore. My heart stopped. Then he continued, I was raised to believe that loyalty to your mother comes before everything, but I was never taught the difference between love and control. He asked to see me. I said yes. We met at a small cafe where we had our first date years ago. It was almost poetic. He looked different, not in his face or clothes, but in his posture. Less proud, more grounded, like a man who had finally stepped into the discomfort of truth and didn't run from it. He said he had gone through our photos, our old messages. He said he had listened again to the recording of his mother. He said he saw it now, how she used love as a leash. And then he said something I'll never forget. You were never against her. She was always against us. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Because I didn't need grand gestures, I didn't need promises. I just needed to know that he saw it, that the fog had lifted, that the war was over. We didn't get back together that day. We took time. We rebuilt slowly, carefully. He started therapy. He stopped taking her calls, not out of hate, but out of protection. For him, for me, for our future. And me? I found my voice again. I stopped tiptoeing through my own marriage. I stopped apologizing for existing, for loving, for needing boundaries. Because here's what I learned. Love can survive storms, but it cannot survive manipulation if we choose silence. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away until the other person learns to walk toward you. He did, eventually. And as for her, she still tells people I turned him against her. She plays the victim in every story she tells. But now, I don't need to prove anything, because the man who used to listen to her whispers now only listens to truth. Do you know someone going through something like this? Have you ever had to walk away just to be seen? Tell me in the comments. Your voice matters. And maybe, just maybe, your story will help someone else find their way out of the dark.